not known? Hast thou not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary? There is no searching of his understandings. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. These are words of comfort that God gave Isaiah in a time of Israel's despair, when they too were going through a burden they thought so heavy, a troubled time they thought so unbearing. They thought that they could make it another day. I can see in my mind's eye how they look toward heaven to wonder, how can we make it just another day through this time of horror, this time of pain? And the question came from God: hast thou not known, hast thou not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of everything, he fainteth not, neither is he ever weary? I feel right now that we are in a time like that. All across America, good people of will of many races are joining us as African Americans, hurting and wounded in pain by the shameful travesty of justice that was perpetrated in Sanford, Florida last night. That a young black boy, unarmed, guilty of no crime, can be shot down, slaughtered, and his killer be freed. That somehow a boy's fist equal a man's gun. To somehow suggest that the victim is the killer and not the killed. It brought me back in a flashback to a time of my youth, to another boy who was struck down in the youth of his life. 1955, Emmett Till, who shocked America, and he was guilty of no crime other than breaking what was called the racial code of his time. And I thought of the comparison of the two, so if you don't mind, for a little while, bear with me as I discuss a tale of two teens, Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin. Take your seats in the presence of the Lord. A tale of two teens, Emmett Till and Trayvon Martin. In an article of the January-February edition of the Washington Monthly, accomplished writer Elijah Anderson, whom I personally know, shares some interesting commentary. After the tragic and premature deaths, both Emmett Till, age 14, and Trayvon Martin, age 17, became symbols of the unique challenges that face young black men in America. Separated by 1,000 miles, 2 state borders, and nearly 6 decades, 2 young African American teenagers met tragic fates that seem remarkably similar today. Both walked into a small market to buy some candy, and both ended up dead. The first is Emmett Till, who was 14 years old in the summer of 1955 when he walked into a local grocery store in Money, Mississippi to buy chewing gum. He was later roused from his bed in the middle of the night, beaten brutally, shot by a group of white men, then hung and his body dumped into a nearby river. And they claimed he had stepped out of his place by flirting with a young white woman, the wife of the store's owner. The second boy is Trayvon Martin, who was 17 years old last winter when he walked into a 7-Eleven store near a gated community in Sanford, Florida, to buy Skittles and an iced tea. He was later shot to death at close range by George Zimmerman, who claimed Martin had behaved suspiciously and seemed out of place. And note carefully that Emmett Till was decreed to be out of place, and Trayvon Martin was decreed to be out of place. The deaths of both these young boys galvanized the nation, drew sympathy and disbelief across racial lines. Through the popular media, promoted the re-examination of race relations in America, because we have not come as far as we think we have come. In the case of Emmett Till, Roy Bryant, and J.W. Milam of Leflore County, Mississippi, were acquitted. In fact, the grand jury refused to bring an indictment against them. Both never served a day in jail for the death of Emmett Till. And late last night, to my dismay, a jury of 6 women, odd enough to have a jury of 6, but a jury of 6 women acquitted George Zimmerman of second-degree murder in the death of Trayvon Martin. The racism that led to Till's death was embedded in a virtual and virulent ideology of white racial superiority born out of slavery and the Jim Crow codes of the Deep South. That sort of racism hinges on the idea that blacks are inherently inferior and morally null, and therefore not deserving of full status as citizens of this country. The racial prejudice on the counterpart that led to the death of Trayvon Martin is different. While it too was born out of America's painful legacy of slavery and Jim Crow and segregation, it reflects the urban iconography of today's racial inequality, namely the intimidating black male image. It's a form of racism that is birthed in stereotypical notions, stereotyping of a race or a people. George Zimmerman believed that Trayvon Martin was out of his place in the upscale condominium area where he was. George Zimmerman made a decision that Trayvon Martin didn't look like he fit in the community in which he was walking. George Zimmerman made a decision that the court in Sanford, Florida refused to even acknowledge that he had racially profiled Trayvon Martin and made a decision to follow him. And I ask any of you today, if you saw someone following you and you found out it was not the police, you too would be defensive about somebody following you. It does not matter if Trayvon hit him first, because I might have hit him first too. That has no bearing on the matter at all. But this is what the courts and the system used to acquit George Zimmerman. That instead of George Zimmerman defending himself, how about Trayvon Martin defending himself? Can America ask itself this question? Could a black man shoot a 17-year-old white boy? Do you even remotely think that a black man could shoot a 17-year-old unarmed white boy and not be arrested? Nor the less be acquitted?